Alrighty.
Hi, Antonique. How are you?
Hey, girlie, I'm good. I'm good. Maybe I should change my name. What you
Mm,
think?
No, 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 no. You are the leadership catalyst. Come through.
Awesome.
That is what we are doing today. We are pushing people into their next. We are making sure that they go out there and they move. This topic tonight is it's time to move. So we need
Mm.
leadership catalyst. We need Coach Antonique Etora to come.
Hello.
So how are you doing?
I'm good. Honestly, in transition mode, but I'm good. In a new season, trying to find my way, but trying to navigate with God is the best decision. So I'm good. Ain't easy, but I'm good.
I got you. I got you. So since we started out with this name, Leadership Catalyst Institute, tell us a little bit about the Leadership Catalyst Institute.
Woo, okay. So, okay, God, I see what you're doing. So, Leadership Catalyst. Before there was ever a Leadership Catalyst Training Institute, God downloaded Leadership Catalyst in my spirit. I had recently became a Christian life coach and trying to navigate, okay, how do I launch this coaching business? Do I launch with being a resilience coach? But it so happened that at my coaching certification training, our coach asked us, what type of coach do you want to be? And everyone went around the room saying, they wanted to be either a business coach or any coach, you name it, relationship coach. And me, who never knew anything about coaching, when she came to me, the words that came out of my mouth was, I'm going to be a coach's coach. And I was like, she said, oh, so you're going to train coaches like me? And I said, yeah. I guess I am. This is me having dialogue with the Holy Spirit and with her at the same time. And God planted that seed in me because I had no idea what a coach's coach was. So even before I launched the company or launched anything, one day I was driving and I heard the words, leadership catalyst. And God decided to just pour so much on me in that one moment. But when he talked about leadership catalyst, he talked about who he had created me to be. And I looked back at different stages of my life, and in different areas, he always made me a trainer's trainer. So whether it was in nursing school, whether it was in ministry, but now it's coming into coaching. And so Leadership Catalyst Training Institute is God's company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whilst he was downloading this name, he also downloaded me the very first mission or the first objective of this company that hadn't even been created yet. And he said, between now and the year 2025, I need you to train and certify 10,000 Christian life coaches.
My God.
I said, God, like, can we take off some zeros? Like, how about 100?
Let's squeeze that down a little piece.
How about 100? Or how about 1,000? I could see that within 5 years. And he said, no, 10,000 coach catalysts.
So it was time to move. It was time to get the work started because you need this 10,000 by this particular time. So it's like, okay, we gotta get it. And just a side note, I was a part of the Leadership Catalyst Institute. And let me tell you, I can testify that my life, my coaching, just the ministry that God has called me to has just been catapulted since that day. It's almost like this sleeping giant that was inside of you has just been awakened and you just got to move. And so I can attest to what it is that Antonique is saying because she really is a coach's coach. She really knows how to go in to pull some things out of you, to ask the right questions. Y'all, I was in tears and I had to cut my little camera off because I couldn't let her see me, I was in tears because the questions that she was asking, boy, they was hitting. They was digging into some deep stuff and getting right under there. So yes, but so you had this vision, this message from God as to what it is that he wanted you to do. And then you heard 10,000 coaches. So take me on a journey. What happened from there to now? Because we're talking about it's time to move and you're hearing this. And so what's the next step for you?
Oh, child, I will be completely honest with you. Disobedience happened.
Okay.
Yeah,
Be
because
transparent with the people. Let them know.
yes,
Let them know.
I will be. Disobedience happened. And not because I didn't believe in God, but because I didn't believe in myself.
That's good.
And I was like, God, I know you're calling me to do this, but me, really 10,000? And so I think my fear took me into a mode of being stuck for a while because I wasn't doing anything. I just kind of did the minimal to make it look like, okay, God, I'm doing your word. So I did stuff like, got a logo like that, like that's going to impact someone's life, right? And I kind of started making out at least the vision and the mission of the company, a little booklet of what I want things to look like. But I myself did not move forward right away. What God did was I started praying and I was like, God, I want to be more consistent in you. I want to do the things that you call me to do. And he took me back to a season where I was asking him the very same question. And God's response was, okay, go make your bed. I was like, what? And in that season, I understood because I was so chaotic. I would have days where I would have, my books on the bed. I would have clothes that need to fall up on the bed, all of these things. But it was in that moment where I went in and I started to declutter my bed that he reminded me to declutter my mind, declutter my physical space of what I thought I needed to do or the things that were taking up room and space, but weren't getting me anywhere. And so I started to, this time I didn't have to physically make up my bed, but I had to spiritually make up my mind. And so I'm like, okay, God, I don't know which direction to take, but I'm going to trust your leading. And the moment that it came was not the moment that I expected it. I was waiting for the calm time, like, God, if I just had enough time, if I just had enough resources, if I just had enough money. God was not interested in all of that. What he was interested in was my obedience. And so what he did was, this was around, God gave me that download about early 2019. It was about late 2019. I think this was early 2020 when COVID started to kind of take rampant in the Bahamas. Like we were watching it on the news and it hit home, but it didn't really hit home.
Right.
And so I found myself as a nurse working frontline, like working in COVID care. And it was just one thing after the next. So it was in that moment where I was working COVID care and, I realized that I started to save money because it's lockdown. You can't go anywhere. And I started making more over because only so many nurses were working in the field. And God said, okay, you asked for that finances. Wow. I gave it to you. Wow. Now do your certification to go and train coaches.
Wow.
I'm like, God, but we're in the midst of a pandemic. He's like, you can do it virtually. So I reached out to the coach who had been so amazing in my life and her whole setup. And we had talked about it before briefly, but I never launched out. So this time I launched out, I got my funds together and I'm like, God, whatever the cost is, I'll pay it. And so I sat in sessions with her when I was on my off days. Imagine that, all the hectic things that you're going through, not knowing if you're going to go to work, catch COVID or whatever, get sick. I'm like, God, at this point in time, you're telling me to do it. I'm just going to sit down. So I took the time, I did it. And then the next thing that he said, this was the latter, that was about July, somewhere around July, I believe, 2020. But it wasn't until the end of the month, the end of the year, around November, he said, it's time to launch. Wow. I said, but God, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. He said, yes, it's time to launch. And I'm like, oh God.
I just love how God works.
I said, okay, God, I'm used to moving against the pressure. I'm used to moving against the stretch, but I'm going to grow with the stretch this time. I'm going to move with it because he even started talking to me in physical stuff. Like when I started exercising, he's like, before you jump into any strenuous thing, I need you to stretch, do the proper stretching. And so I said, okay, God, I see you moving in my life and I'm going to move with you, regardless of how it feels and regardless of how it looks. I'm going to move with you. And so at the end of November, I got so many things together. I got my business plan because I had one best friend of mine. She said she wants to do course and she wants to do it with me. She said, but I'm not going to do it unless you have everything in order, which means you need the business license, you need the business plan. And I said, okay, all right, we're going to do this legit. So I got my business license and everything just in time to do my first cohort. My first cohort was with 12 clients and 2 who happened to be international from the jump start. Because God already said it. He said it's going to be an international company from the beginning. So I didn't know where it was coming from. But when I decided to move with God, he started to make things happen for me. So that's in a nutshell what happened and how I started launching and doing what it is that he called me to do.
And there's so many nuggets in there, because at first you started out in disobedience, and then God kept pushing, kept reminding you of the vision it is. And I think that he does that with all of us, the vision that he would have set out for you. And then after you decided to, all of the excuses, first of all, he pushed you aside and said, yeah, you said you need this, go ahead. You need, see it there. And then after that, he told you exactly what to do and how to launch, when to launch, and then boom, just things started to take off. The catalyst just kept moving, kept going. My question to you now is, what would you say to people who are kind of stuck in that indecisive state? They are where you were, basically in disobedience, not wanting to move. And why do you think, we stray like Noah, not Noah, like the one going to Nineveh, Jonah, like Jonah. Why do you think that we stay in that disobedience and try to do our own thing?
Yeah. Okay. So the first portion is, I would tell someone to go back to the word, because often we have to go back to the word, what it is that God gave us. Oftentimes we step away from what it is that he said because of disobedience or because of fear or whatever it is, whether it's procrastination, because it doesn't feel good. We can't understand it. It's so big. But when we go back to God and kind of ask him in a way for different strategy or to break it down a little bit, because sometimes what scares us is seeing the big picture. And we need to go back to God and say, God, could you break this down a little bit more for me? Like, I'm going to give you what I have, but you've got to show me. Like, if I put my foot forward, God, give me a sign. If I do this, God, then give me the next step forward. And God will do that. He wants to work with your obedience, but you can't be obedient if you don't first go back to the word that he put in your heart. So that would be my first thing, is that you have to go back. And sometimes I think, and I guess we're probably going to talk about this a little bit more, but I'll talk about it even here a little bit. Sometimes we feel that, moving forward means just straight ahead. Sometimes in order for you to go forward, you need to take steps back. You need to go back to where it is that you developed that mindset. And for a lot of persons, you're saying, like, why is it that they don't do it? Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's not being sure on their identity. And I was able to share this with a client a few days ago. God took me to the story of the prodigal son or the lost son. And in that moment, he asked his father, give me, I'll paraphrase in the NIV version, the Nikki International version, right? Daddy, give me my teens. Give me all of my stuff. I won't go there. I won't go do stuff, because right here it's boring. Or right here, I don't see it makes sense. I just want my teens and I want to do me, because that's what we is telling. When we walk away from God's word, when we walk away from what it is that he put inside us to do, in essence, we're saying, God, I don't want to do you. I could do me. And so what I found interesting about the son was, after he had spent everything, and you can go in the Bible and look at that whole story, but there was a moment where he came to himself. He recognized, he had a mindset shift, and he realized, like, wait, I put myself in this situation. Like, I've ran away from whatever it is that I was supposed to do at home because I thought this would be easier, or this looked more comfortable, right? And so he had to first make up in his mind that, listen, I'm out here eating with the pigs. My dad, my father has a whole mansion. Like, even if I become a slave, I would be better off than eating here with the pigs. And before he physically moved his feet, he moved and he shifted his mind. And
Mhm.
so I say to the people now, if you're in a place where you're, okay, you've moved away from what God said because you were afraid, you didn't see the money coming in, or you didn't feel worthy enough. Because to me, if he felt like, if he knew that he was a son, he would have stayed in the place of sonship, right? And so a lot of us move out of God's presence into what we feel, like I said, is more comfortable. But you have to make up in your mind that, listen, God, this is not the best fit for me. This version of me, who I thought I wanted to be, is not in alignment with who it is that you call me to become. And so the son went back, but he went back to the place where he lost his identity. And so I tell the persons, like, even now, go back to the place where you lost your hope. Go back to the place where you lost that momentum. Go back to the place where you lost that passion. Go back to the place where you lost your self-worth. Whatever it is, go back to that place. Because if you don't get back to that place, you can't correct the mistakes that you need to correct to move forward. And so that's where I'm at. And I know we're probably going to get into a little bit more, but that's what I feel, because that's where I was.
I want to know, how do you continue? So you start, and some of that you would have shared is basically how you know, teach some of your coaching clients to start to go forward, to break out of these mindsets, to go back to what it is that God would have told them and said they need to be doing. But sometimes those limiting beliefs come back.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you are going and you're doing what it is that God has called you to do, you feel fear. You feel that you're inadequate. You feel these insecurities come up. How do you stay motivated, and how do you, or what's your advice for people to stay motivated in doing what God has called them to do?
And this is something that I talk about in the course, and it's alignment. When we don't have a clear vision of what it is that God has given us, like, sometimes it's so easy to come off track, and life will detour us. Situations will detour us. But for me, when I talk about alignment, like, God personally told me, he may not have told anyone else, but he said, Anthony, and he said this first and foremost through a course. So when I say sometimes God said it, sometimes he'll speak to me through a course or through a person or through the Bible. And so I was in a course a few years ago, and in that particular course, they asked, I was trying to get my course online or my business online. And so the trainer, she asked us to think of three words that we want to think about when it came to setting up our business online, and how would that motivate you and keep you moving forward. But as I kind of transferred or transition in my walk with God and growing with him, he said to me, he said, Anthony, I'll go back to the vision words, but this time I don't want it to be 3. I want it to be 4. I want it to be 4 things that you focus on when you think of what it is that I've put on your heart to do. And so literally on my vision board and different things, because it's not just a vision board, but in my heart, I've literally tattooed these words in my heart and in my mind. And the first word for me is liberty. And I told God, like, whatever it is that I do for him in life, I know that I want to have the freedom to do it. I want to have flexibility. And so the next word was purpose. I said, God, I want to ensure that everything that I do for you is lined up with purpose. The next thing was enjoyment. I say, God, I want to enjoy what it is that I do. Like, it's a good thing to have purpose, but if I'm not enjoying it, then, you know, at some point in time, I'm probably going to be demotivated and kind of step away from it as well. But of course, purpose still keeps you on track. And the last word that God gave me was legacy. And that was the biggest thing for me, because at the end of it all, whether it's me building a business or writing a book or launching a podcast, it's how do I leave my legacy, right? And how do I help others to create a legacy? And so with alignment, he reminded me of a typical vehicle, you know, the ones that take you places on land. So whether it's a car, a truck, a Jeep, a van, usually they have 4 wheels. And so for me, it's always, sometimes, you know, there you have to get a wheel alignment at some point in time, whether the tire is worn out or you hit a pothole or something causes you to get off. And so for me, I literally have to, when I feel my life pulling to one side, and that's what happens usually when you need a wheel alignment, pull to one side because of that issue. And so I'm like, God, whenever I see that there is this or misalignment, I go back to God, like, God, what is this area in my life? And usually I could lead it or link it back to me not being aligned with one of those 4 vision words. And so for me, I would tell persons on the vision that God has for your life, because when you're not in alignment with the vision, you got to go back and ask him how, because life will cause there to be circumstances like the potholes. Life will cause there to be moments where you don't want to endure it. But once you're in constant alignment, and being in constant alignment means you have to go back to the dealership, which means you have to constantly go back to God.
Yes.
Right. And so I have these tug of war moments, because sometimes, I'm learning to be more obedient now. Bless God. Hallelujah. But I have to sometimes get down and I talk to God just like this, like, God, what's happening? And sometimes he'll say me, tell me, your mindset in this area is off. Fix it. And the way that he says fix it is either I go and I watch something inspirational, or I watch a sermon, or I read a book, or there are different ways. When you start asking God, he will give you the answers.
Always thinking.
Always. So that's my encouragement to someone in terms of moving forward. It's not easy, but if you could keep that vision, that you have to stay focused. There has to be a target. If there's no target, you're gonna go all about. So if you can keep in alignment with that target, and I'm so blessed that God has so many ways of keeping in alignment.
Nikki, I absolutely love how God just speaks to you, because that whole analogy, I would have never seen that. My brain was just, it wouldn't have compute. The Lord would have been talking, I've been, what are you talking about? What? Hi, what happened to the wheels?
Oh,
no.
God. I think the issue is that I don't listen the regular way. And so he's had to become a bit more creative with getting my attention.
Okay, I got you. I absolutely love that. So I have 2 more questions, and then we're going to have some final thoughts. So my question to you is, how do you know when it's time to move? Well, I'll ask the 2 questions in one. So the first one is, how do you know when it's time to move, and why is it important to move?
Okay, so for me, I feel like there's that nudging, that internal nudging. And one of my Coach Noel Walren, he often says this. He said, inspiration is instruction from our Creator to do something. God is calling you to do something, and you have to act upon it. He's not just telling you to do it for giving you information. He puts, so whether that's a feeling in your stomach where, for me, with Leadership Catalyst Training Institute, there would be nights I get up at 3 a.m. and God is downloading things. And I'm like, God, I want to sleep. And he's like, no, you need to write. Or I would feel the coaches, like I would feel that there is someone out there who needs to become a coach, because there are people who are attached to our purpose.
Yes.
And it's time for us to start attracting them. And that's one of the things my friend Shay said to me. Shay speaks. And so for me, it's that nudging. And sometimes we ignore our feelings as just feelings, or sometimes God will deposit a direct instruction to you, and you're like, because it's so big, you're like, God, I don't think so. But, or he tells you and you're afraid. And so the next feeling in your subconscious mind is literally to hold off and then to stay like in a frightful mode, because you don't know what to do. But it's important to move, because whatever God is putting on the inside of you is not just for you. It's for someone else. And so I get to the point where I realize that this life is not my own. And if I'm talking about being a legacy builder and empowering others, I've got to start getting up and moving, even if it's for the one, because sometimes we get caught up on, it has to be this amount of persons. But I'm so grateful, like, and when I saw you posting your masterclass, I felt empowered and I felt inspired, and I felt proud to know that God, because I was obedient, someone else was able to do what it is that you've called them to do, so that they can reach others. And it's important because there's a scripture that says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And so I believe that God is calling us to, once we are harvested by someone who is a laborer, someone who speaks into your soul, someone who pulls out of you what God has already put on the inside of you, it's time for you to move and become the laborer, because there's a harvest of souls for the kingdom. If you launched your business, if you launch your podcast, if you write your book, it's for kingdom. We're not doing it for the money or anything else, though those things come. It's for kingdom. Somebody is waiting on you. Somebody is in a suicidal state. And because you don't launch the podcast, they're not going to hear that. And the moment that they needed to hear it the most, because of your disobedience, like, we have to think of it like our people's lives are in our hands, right? And even if it's not that drastic, what if all that one person needed to do was read the first chapter of your book? Sometimes we feel like it has to be something so drastic. One thing that you wrote could change their mindset and shift their life forever. And so for me, I'm constantly at a place where I'm like, God, you said 10,000, it's not to make me rich. It's because the earth is groaning. The earth is waiting for the manifestation of God's sons and of God's daughters. It has nothing to do with me. And I can't do it by myself. So it's time to move. You got to get up. And sometimes you got to tell yourself that. Get up. Get moving. And I had to do that to myself. Sometimes I literally had to yuck myself out of bed to do something. But you got to get up and you got to move.
That's it right there. You renewed my passion even more in that short space of time, because that is so right. You are so right. Sometimes we trivialize what it is that God has laid on our hearts because we trivialize ourselves. We think of ourselves, and it's so selfish to be thinking of yourself, because that's not the purpose. That's not why God dropped this in your spirit. He didn't do it for you. This ain't about you. It is about God. It is about his people. It is about those that he has called you to reach. Thank you so much, Coach Antonique. Thank you so much for this talk, because listen, and I hope somebody on this live is really getting this nugget. They're really being thrusted into what it is that God has called them to do. So you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all your ducks lined up in a row. Antonique was saying, Lord, I need the money, I need this, that, and the next thing. And the Lord say, come, girl, come. Let's go. Come. Stop slapping up. Let's do this. And I'm just so grateful for you, for what God has laid on your heart. Antonique and I have been friends for a long time. I think this has almost been 10 years, probably about 8 years now. And I have watched her, and I am so inspired by just your yes, by just your obedience to God, your push to keep on going. It may not have come easy, but thank you for what it is that you have done, for who it is that you're going to touch, and for all that God has laid on your heart. So we're going to have some final thoughts now. Just anything that you want to leave with the people.
Okay, so my final thought is, I want you to give yourself permission to ask yourself. Like, sometimes we are afraid to ask ourselves the hard questions, but begin to ask yourself the hard questions of, why is it that you're stuck? What is it that I'm really afraid of? And not just ask yourself for asking sake. Ask yourself and then give yourself permission to move beyond that. Say, I understand why I'm here, but now I'm in a place where I'm accepting of it, but I'm not going to wait here. I want to move, and I'm giving myself permission to get up and to go after it and to move to whatever God has called me to do.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, guys. If you need to reach out to Coach Antonique, all of the information is on the screen. Definitely, if you want to take her course, hit her up. I can attest that Leadership Catalyst, trust me, it will change your life. You got a snippet of what this one-day intensive is. And trust me, it's even more than that. All of those treasures that are inside of you, she has been anointed to yuck them out. So thank you guys so very much. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.
Bye.